welcome to Real Health with me, Karl Henry. Folks, on this episode of the podcast, Eoin McGee joins us to talk about financial anxiety. I think we all have a bit of that. Why money is so emotionally charged, and how to create realistic plans that work. We explore investing without fear, the traps of comparison culture. Again, we're definitely guilty of that too. And practical steps that anyone can take this week to feel more in control of their finances. Eoin McGee, welcome back.
Thank you very much for having me back.
How's life? I know how life is. You're flat out between. You've another book out. You've been on tour, and you're going even more tours. You've got one in Cork, one in Kerry.
Yeah,
life's bonkers.
Yeah, so it's interesting because you kind of get scared when you do these live. I can do lots of corporate speaking, no different than yourself, Karl. But the idea of asking people to put their hand in their pocket, come out in an evening, give up an evening of their own, and come out and listening to someone talk about money at the end of the day—that's what it is. Like, it's boring and it's simple. But you know what? It was brilliant. The audiences were brilliant. The feeling was brilliant in it. And I got that feedback from others. And I originally did Limerick and Dublin, and very quickly realised that we missed out on not doing Cork. Like, the amount of people who came. Well, you'll
have to open with that in Cork, by the way, when you do it, because they'll never forgive you.
So very quickly realised, but we were in at that stage, and those two were locked in. I said, let's just see how these two go. They went so well that I immediately went and agreed to do the Everyman in Cork, and we're also doing the Glen Eagle in Killarney. So really looking forward to that.
I suppose between like the new book and the live shows, it shows you the hunger for financial knowledge and financial empowerment, maybe, and control and info.
Absolutely. Like, the book is now, this is my third book. And the third book, when you've written books, Karl, when the first two get #1 bestseller and you put the third one on the shelf, you're like, everything below bestseller is a failure, or you're not going to be happy with. And this book really challenged me. Like, it really kind of, I had to go to the well to get it. But I'm going to be honest with you, it's the proudest one. I'm the most proud of this one. And that's interesting because the first book is the best-selling personal finance book of all time by an Irish author. Yeah. So that's a great thing to have. Yeah. But the fact that the third book, like, I'm really happy with it. I'm really happy with the way it's going. And people are saying things to me about it a lot. And that's a great thing to hear as well, that people have already kind of consumed it, digested it, and are spitting it back out at me. And that's great to hear. But there's an appetite out there. But I do think the appetite for finances in Ireland has shifted a little bit over the last couple of years. One of the things like that I find interesting, my Instagram on a Saturday, and I know we've interacted
the Q&As,
a couple of times.
Yeah,
my Q&A, I'll throw it up to be between 800 and 1,200 questions every Saturday. I'll reply to about 20 or 30 of them, depending on how my day goes. It's a perfect platform for Ireland. Mm-hmm. Like, think about it. You get to ask a question. For people who aren't familiar with it, someone asks me a question, I answer the question. Everyone sees the question. Everyone sees the answer, but nobody sees who asked the question. Yes. It's perfect for Ireland when it comes to money, right? Yep. So we want to talk about our money. We don't anyone know about our own. We want to know everything about everyone else's. So it's a perfect medium and platform for doing that. But then it's great to see that there's a deeper dive required as well, and people want to see it. They want to go to live shows, and they want to see how that works out, and they want to read the books, and they want to do the Q&As, and they want to read the column that I write for The Independent here as well. There's a lot of stuff, platforms and availability there, and people are consuming it, which is lovely.
Chat to me about, I suppose, the nation's financial health, because I follow your Q&As, right? And I think I've DM'd you a few times. Every now and again one comes in and someone's like, yeah, I have 600 grand in the bank, what do I do with it? I'm like, who has 600 grand in the bank?
Yeah.
Like, how are we on generally, like the people that you interact with, the people that you see at the shows, who read the books, how are we? Are we concerned about money? Are we earning a bit, like, everything's got more expensive, so are we comfortable with money?
Well, the first thing to us to accept and to recognise is life in Ireland is 50% more expensive now than it was 5 years ago.
50%?
Yeah. So that kind of gives you an idea of where we're at. Now, but that has actually created a wider gap between the top and the bottom. There's people who are really struggling, and struggling worse than they've ever struggled before. There's people at the top end who have created incredible wealth over the last few years. COVID was very good to the very wealthy. Like, it really allowed them to ramp up their wealth and do incredibly well out of it. But then you've also got a squeezed middle who unfortunately are still in the thinking that if I keep doing what I was doing 5 years ago, I'm going to get the same result, right?
Well, 100 grand salary 5 years ago was a lot of money.
Yeah.
100 grand salary today, if life is 50% more expensive, doesn't travel that far.
My stat is a little bit out of date, but I was doing a thing on prime time one night, and the piece I recorded and the fact I had on the day was TD's basic salary. I think from memory now, please don't call me out on this because it's about a year ago, right? A TD salary from my memory was 108,000 without allowances and stuff, and a TD salary couldn't buy you the average house in Dublin anymore.
Wow.
Right, so that just kind of puts it in perspective. But if you think about the level of wealth, right, we have 169 billion sitting in bank accounts, not companies.
I saw Simon Harris's TikTok around this the other day, yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting what Simon is at and kind of going out there. And Simon, if you want to have a chat with me, let's talk about how that should be communicated, about how we're going to invest that money. And I mean,
the theory behind it seems very, from the layman. Now, I'm very layman with money. I on that level, in terms of what do you do with it, like the idea of what they're trying or what he's trying to do, which is get the money working, makes sense.
And this is coming from Europe, by the way. Like, if you look at it from a European level, so for people who aren't familiar with it, there's talk of doing a savings type scheme that would encourage us to take some of the money that's sitting on deposit and put it into shares, right? And the minute you mention the word shares, people go, oh, I'll lose. And I always say it, right? Someone will say to me, oh no, I wouldn't touch shares. A friend of mine lost money on shares. I wouldn't touch shares. That is the same as saying, oh, I wouldn't eat food. My friend got food poisoning once, right? It's nothing to do with food. It's to do with the food they ate. Mm-hmm. It's nothing to do with shares. It's to do with the shares you bought, right? And yes, you can lose money on shares, but if it's done right, you have stats to back you up to beat the band, to say, look, set it up right at the start, invest and forget. But it's getting it right at the start. And I do mean that, right? I think what they're trying to achieve, what Simon Harris is trying to achieve, what government are trying to achieve, I absolutely back what they're trying to do. I just think the messaging could be slightly different. I think it needs to be really dumbed down. Like, my world of investing and professional advice and all that, they make stuff overly complicated, in my opinion, just to create jobs for themselves. It's actually simple. It's really boring. Stop trying to make it complicated to make yourself look good. Just explain it to people in the way that they'll understand, and we'll all get along much better. So I do agree with it. And before anyone kind of is questioning, oh, is he a Fine Gael or is he a Fianna Fáil? I have a very clear policy when it comes to politicians. I will talk to any politician whose policy I agree with, right? I'm not politically aligned with any party. I don't care who they are. But if it's something that I think is good for the people of Ireland, and that's very for the people of Ireland, if I think it's something that people will benefit from, I'll get behind it, whoever the party is.
Is it fair to say that people are, many people are driven by money as the primary goal, and that's a problem in itself?
Yeah, sorry, I come back to the mic. I think that are people driven by money? That's one of the biggest mistakes you can make, right? I think a perfect example of that is it's not even an example. I'll give you an example in a second, but let's just look at the maths on it. If you say to yourself, I'm going to be happy when I have €1,000 in savings, the minute you get there, you'll want to get to 2,000. I'll be happy when I get to 10 grand in savings. When you get there, same as your salary. I'll be happy when my salary goes from 50 grand to 55 grand. Sure, I'll be happy then. You won't be, because when it's a money goal, you keep moving the goalposts. Perfect example of that. Another newspaper had an article there a couple of weeks ago, and basically they listed out the top 11 billionaires in Ireland, right? I don't know why it wasn't 10. I don't know why it wasn't 12, but it was 11, right? And actually that night I was doing the show in the Lime Tree in Limerick. It happened to be in Limerick. And I looked down through the list and I kind of asked the audience the question, what do you think probably 50% of those people who are on that list, they are billionaires, they're the richest people in Ireland? And I would suggest half of the people on that list at least are looking at the person above them and going, I want to get to that, right? And what I found really interesting is JP McManus didn't make the list.
Go on.
He's worth it's hard to know what he's worth, but supposedly he's worth 2.1 billion and didn't make the top 11. Maybe if it was 12, maybe he would have made it. But you'd have to imagine if you're tipping around it. So even the richest people in the country are still trying to get it. So when your goal is to make money, when your goal is to get to a certain level of money, you're never getting there. You're never going to be happy. So you have to make the reason why you engage with your money, the reason why you try and tackle your finances, the reason why you try and get good with money, you have to get a different reason for that than other than just monetary, right? And that other reason is staring you in the face. What do I want to do with my life, right?
Okay,
and once you establish what you want to do with your life, then a financial planner like me can sit down and work out the maths and tell you exactly how much is enough, right? So I want to retire when I'm young. I want to go sea kayaking around the west coast of Cork for 6 months of the year, and then I'll work forever, right? Whatever it is, you build out what you want your life to be, and you build a financial plan around that. Now you have a very defined, specific goal about what you need to do with your money, and you get there and you achieve it. And you know what's nice about a financial plan? It's dynamic. Once it's printed out, it's out of date. Your plans change next year. In 6 months' time, you change the financial plan, you adjust, and you move on. But that's the important thing. And a lot of times people don't get that idea of, what is it that I'm doing this for? Because if you haven't established your why, if you don't know why you're doing it, you won't do it for very long. And you won't tackle your finances for very long, and you won't try and fix them, and you won't be encouraged or motivated to do. Money is boring. It's simple, straightforward, and it's boring. And so it should be, because it's only there to support the life you're supposed to have.
It does put a lot of people under pressure, though. And when they are under pressure, they will go for $4,000 a month, $2,000 a month. They will have the number comes into it. What's the biggest mistake people make when they do find themselves under financial pressure?
The amount of times people will stop me in the street and they say, can I just ask you a question? I say, yeah, of course you can. Now, I'm asking for a friend.
Of course, yeah.
Right? It's not about them, because there is a taboo around talking about money. And when you hit financial difficulties, just think about this for a second. 1 in 3 people in Ireland struggle financially from time to time, or in a financial quandary, or have financial concerns, right? So that means if you're listening to this at home and you're not in financial difficulty, think of 2 of your best mates. One of them statistically is. Because if you're not, and 1 of 3 of you is, one of them is. And what I would say is if we could just have that conversation and just talk about money. It doesn't have to be, I'm in dire straits. It doesn't have to be, I'm brilliant and I've got loads of it. It can be, I was listening to Owen and Karl having a chat about money, and Owen says we should just say, what's your relationship like with money? Or what's the best thing you ever did with money? What was the best use of your money? And what you've done there is you've pushed the door open to that person to say, listen, if ever want to talk about
it's
money,
an invitation to speak about it. Yeah.
But you've also got figured out for yourself that if ever you need to speak to them, you're doing it on your terms right now, so you know what reaction you're going to get in the future. And I'm on a crusade the last couple of years. I want to get a country that doesn't talk about money talking about money, one conversation at a time. And that's what you're trying to achieve. And
if you're under pressure, be open about it, talk about it.
And I have had people come to me on the street and say, look, this is what's going on for this person. And you quickly establish, look, it's them. And you don't want to put them under pressure. That's fine. But my advice is always the same. The first person you need to speak to if you're under real financial stress is your best mate. Your best mate might be your partner. It might be your brother or your sister. It might be your schoolmate that you've known for 20 years. It doesn't matter who it is. Talk to your best mate, because when you're in that position, when you talk to anybody else about it, it isn't just a problem halved. It's more than that. You very quickly get someone who's outside the woods, looking at the woods, saying to you, this is what needs to be done. And they might say, yeah, you know what we need to do? We need to go to MABS. We'll go together. Or they might say, you know what? All you have to do this. I was in this position before. Just ring them, tell them to do that and do this. And they might have a solution there and then. And there's another element to that. Like, there's an element of sometimes our money worries can be escalated in our brain, right? And I am not a neuroscientist, but I did do some research for the current book, and I got fascinated by it. And I want you to imagine, and for people who are listening to this, I'm pointing at the front of my forehead, right? Imagine the front of your forehead, that part of your brain is for logical, rational thinking, okay? And for people listening, imagine the back of your head is for fight or flight, okay? When you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, a logical, rational part of your brain is actually asleep. Because that's a logical, rational thing to do, to be asleep at 2 o'clock in the morning. And when you start to thinking about worries, whether they're financial or something else, but when you start to think about worries and things that are, because it's the fight or flight part of your brain, the piece of your brain that has to stay awake in the middle of the night in case a bear comes into the cave, that's taking control now. And it's thinking about this money worry or this other worry you have. And that's why in the middle of the night it seems such a big problem. And you wake up the next morning, the logical, rational part of your brain now is fully awake and it's going, oh no, just do this, this and this, and gets it sorted out. And one of the pieces of research that I looked at actually proved, it was a US piece of research, and what they proved was having $500 for $500, because it was US research, $500 in a buffer is enough to shut the fight or flight part of your brain down in the middle of the night. Because you can just go, I'll deal with this in the morning, right? The bear's not getting me. I have a buffer, right? And that, to me, that one solid piece of kind of simple, straightforward stuff. Now, some people would say getting up to 500 quid in a buffer is a difficult thing to do. Do it over 10 months at 50 quid a month.
But have a buffer.
Do it over 20 months at 25 quid a month, but just start to build it up, because having $500 or €500 in a buffer is enough to dramatically turn down the financial anxiety that people feel. And actually, what you should get to is 3 months take-home pay. Right, but 500 is your first goal, 1,500 is your second goal, and then it's 3 months take-home pay. And people say, "Oh, do I not?" You can touch it, you can go into it. When life happens, you dip into it. But that's fine.
Like, you know, the car breaks down, the tire goes. There's children involved. There's lots of that kind of stuff. There's always money going out somewhere that you haven't planned, that you can't plan for. It just happens,
and that's what people call financial surprises, right? There's very few real financial surprises. Financial surprise is what we called something when we weren't prepared for it financially, right? But we should have been, or we could have been. And when you use a buffer properly, when you use a buffer properly, what happens is people who don't have a buffer reach for the credit card when life happens.
Oh yeah.
Okay. But let's just say, take your tires as an example. Let's say you go, oh, the tires are gone in the car, 480 quid, let's just say. 480 quid to fix the tires. And you don't have it from cash flow this month. You reach for your buffer, you pay for the tires. Then you think to yourself as you drive away from getting the tires, and you go, do you know what? It was this time last year the tires went. So they'll probably go this time next year. Now, what do? There's two things. First, you have to repay the buffer. The same way you would have paid back the credit card, you pay yourself back. Okay? And the second thing you need to do is put 40 quid a month aside. I don't care if you use a pocket, a space, a wallet. I don't care if you use a physical envelope in the kitchen that says tires this time next year on it. Whatever, March 2027, right?
Or have a spreadsheet.
Yeah, you can do it with a spreadsheet.
I love a good spreadsheet.
Yeah, lots of people don't. So you're the odd one out there, right?
Ultimate peace is I have a work one and I have a home one. I'm the whole house on my spreadsheet. You'd love it. It's like, because we moved into the house. Again, when you moved into when you move into a new house, you're trying to come to terms with the running of it. And that spreadsheet gave us the first year in particular a skeleton of here's what our life costs basically. Yeah. And then tried to get it down since then. But I love a spreadsheet.
But you're right. And what that gave you guys was clarity and control.
Right? Control, dude. Control.
And that's the whole point. And sometimes people will avoid doing a spreadsheet because they don't know what it looks like.
Avoids it.
Yeah, I don't want to see it.
Yeah.
Whether you see it or you don't see it, it's still the same.
Correct.
Right? So not seeing it doesn't help anything.
Yep.
Seeing it, sometimes you see it, you go, oh, it's not as bad as I thought. Yep. Right? We used to have that with the TV show, with How to Be Good with Money, where people would say off camera before they'd sit down, because I'd have done an analysis on their finances, they'd be sitting down, and they'd be saying off camera, like, oh God, I'm terrified what Owen's going to say to me about my money. And you're kind of like, it's your money. You should know. Like, Owen didn't change your finances.
But people do. There are some people who think I'm bad at money. I just won't go there. Yeah. And like, they'll just hope that it all works out.
Do you know what? There was another piece of neuroscience research that I did about being bad with money. If you tell your brain you're bad with money, you will be bad with money.
It's self-fulfilling.
Yeah,
of course,
absolutely.
Yeah. And you're running from
And I talk about it in the book. I talk about the fact that now I call my brain Sam, and that means, because I've called my brain Sam, that what I'm trying to achieve there is create a separate entity from me. That it means I can question my thoughts, I can question what I'm thinking, and I can hit it back and say, no, I don't want to think that way. Give me something else. And what's really interesting about that is some of the things that change as a result of that. So someone says, I'm bad with money. Sam is going to say back, yeah, look this here, look what you did there. You bought that thing there, and now next week it was 10 grand cheaper, right? You're bad with money. That was a stupid decision to make. I'm talking about a car here, right? Or something to that effect. And that would convince. But if you say to Sam, no, I'm really good with money, Sam is the yes person in the office. Sam goes out looking for things that confirm you are right. It's like, yes boss, yes boss, yes boss. Oh boss, you did that. Look what the result of that was great. And if you don't believe me, right, if you've ever bought a red car, you see loads of red cars in the road. It's confirmation bias. And it's not that there's extra red cars in the road. It's just Sam has started to notice them and tell you made the right decision.
So you're not bad at money. You need to cop yourself on. You need to look at it and do a bit of the why and a bit of planning.
Yeah.
And then hopefully that improves things. And that gets us to two other questions. One, and the first of which is then investing, which Simon Harris is all about, which is great. But people like myself who have no clue how to do it are petrified of it. Chat to us about investing then. So if you have a few bob, you've saved up, you've done your work in terms of getting your bank account into a healthier state, you've some deposits sitting there, what do you do with it?
Yeah. So interesting, with that 169 billion that's sitting on deposit right now, I would suggest that about 104 to 106 of that should not be there, because it will not be used in the next 5 years. And that's the 5-year rule. So the first thing you need to do is get it out of there. If you're not going to use it in the next 5 years, put it somewhere else. Where do we not put it? Or where do I not put it? I don't go chasing the next big thing. So the next big thing might be crypto. It might be gold. Might be NFTs. Do you remember them? So that's the point. Half the listeners might have a murky memory of NFTs. They were going to be huge and people spent fortune. They were non-fungible tokens, and basically they were graphic images. They were images that were digitally produced. Art, basically, that was digitally produced. They just died a death. They're gone completely and people lost fortunes on them. And that's the point. The next big thing can make you loads of money. It absolutely can. But you have to invest in 22 next big things for one of them to work out statistically. And that means that someone who does do well on a next big thing has either forgotten or is failing to tell you about the money they lost in the first 21, or they landed on number 22 purely randomly. Okay, so I'm not saying you can't make money with next big things. I'm just saying I'm not chasing it because the stats are stacked against me. The odds are stacked against me. The other one, property, we could go on and you know what, it'll throw up a whole pile of comments and everything for you. I am not a massive fan of property. If I have a client who comes into me as a whole pile of property portfolio, really slow to tell them to sell it. But if a client comes into me saying, I'm thinking about buying a property, I'm really slow to encourage them to buy it. Really simple terms, you can't bring a brick into Brown Thomas. And what I mean by that is, if you have a 4-bedroom house worth 400,000 euros and you need 100 grand, you can't sell a bedroom. You're either all in or you're all out. That's just the way it works. So, and there's lots of other reasons why I can explain why property isn't a really attractive thing. But ultimately, you can get the same, if not better, returns by going into the likes of shares and bonds.
How does one go into shares and bonds?
So
does one go online and set up an account?
You can, yeah, you can do it. There's lots of platforms and digital platforms out there that you can do it. Your banking app will allow you to do it. You can walk into your bank, you can speak to your financial advisor, your financial planner, the person who does the pension in the office. The pension advisor should be able to get you to do it. You could go to a stockbroker. There's lots of different ways to do it, but you do need to be careful how you do it, because, and people sometimes, the first thing you need to do is get a bit of an understanding of how it works. Like, if you think about it, shares, people go, oh, shares, I don't understand shares. That's why they buy property, because I can see the property, I can touch the property, I can smell the property, I know I buy the property and the rent goes into my bank once a month. So the property is attractive because they understand it. When it comes to shares, I don't understand it. So let's just kind of bring it right back down. Imagine your brother-in-law is setting up a business. Doesn't matter what the business, he's going to sell widgets, right? And your brother-in-law is setting up ABC Limited widgets. And they turn around to you and they say, need a few quid. So what I'm going to do is I know that the business, or they've got advice to say the business is worth 100 grand, right? And they say to you, if you give me 20 grand, you'll own 20% of the business. Okay? You give them 20 grand, you own 20% of the business. Next year, when the business is really profitable and doing really well, when you take all the money that came in and you deduct all the expenses of that business, you're left with the profit. And you're a shareholder and you own 20% of the business. So in simple terms, you'll get 20% of the profits and they'll keep 80% of the profits. And that's how it works. And let's imagine the business does really, really well and trades really, really, really well. In 10 years' time, someone comes along and says, yeah, I want to buy that business off you. And they value it at $1 million. Now you own 20% of the £1 million and you get 200 grand back. Now, that's how shares work. You own shares in your brother-in-law's widget business. And what's happened is you got the shares and you own 20% of the business, which meant that you got a share of the profits, which is what's called a dividend when it comes to shares. Dividends are to shares like rent is to a property. It's just a share of the profits. Now, they don't have to distribute the profits. They can decide to retain the profits and reinvest them back in the business, and that's a whole, but you don't need to get that complicated. But when you think about it, owning shares in your brother-in-law's widget business, now take that concept and apply it to Tesla and Coca-Cola and Disney and CRH and AIB if you want to, right? And all of the big branded companies that you can think of, the biggest and best companies, I'm not saying that list I gave you the best ones, right? But the biggest and best companies that you can imagine, all the household names, and imagine you bought a tiny bit of all of them. When we build a portfolio for a client, it typically ends up with exposure to about 13,000 different entities. Okay, we have it really well spread out. So I can look my client in the eye and I can say to them, next year, I promise you, I'm going to have all the winners for you. And I'm going to have all the losers for you. And I'm going to have everything in between. And provided the winners cover the losses made by the losers, you're getting the return of what's happening in the middle. And it's really that simple. You own a tiny bit of all the biggest companies in the world. And then people go, but how do people lose money? When you scratch the surface of people who have lost money on these things, there's a couple of rules that they've broken. One, they went in and came out real quick. Or they tried to time the markets. The best time to put money into an investment is 10 years ago, right? But the next best time is today. The best time to put money into an investment is when you have it. The best time to take it out is when you need it. And the best thing to do is leave loads of time between the two things. Because if it's set up right at the start and you invest and forget, it works.
And is that why pensions work so well then? Because they are generally longer term vehicles of 10, 20, 30, 40 years.
Absolutely. But it's also not something that you're looking at on a regular basis. That's what I worry about with platforms. With these platforms and you're sitting on the couch, and you're flicking through and it gives you a notification. Remember with these things, these digital banks, right? These fintech banks, they make money when you buy and when you sell. You make money when you buy and you hold. Right? But they'll keep encouraging, giving you a notification. Oh, you should do this. This is what happened on the market today. Why don't you move some of this from here to here and here? And that's not the behavior of a long-term investor. There was a US company who had a whole pile of customers who had no financial advisor, no wealth advisor in the middle. They just bought funds off this company, a couple of 100,000 customers. And they went about a project of identifying the best performing customers they had. I said, these people have no advisor. How did these people do this? Now, this is a bit of an urban legend because it was originally, it was debunked and I don't know, right. But anyway, we're going to go with it anyway because I think it tells a really, really clever, clear story. They went about identifying the top 100 customers and they contacted them and said, what's your secret sauce here? What did you do? Like, what did you different from everybody else? 80% of them had either forgotten about the account or they were dead. Mm-hmm. In other words, they did nothing. It turns out the research shows us women versus men. Women turn out to be much better investors than men. Because a woman typically, right, don't go for me, right? This is the research, not my research. But a woman will typically do all the analysis at the start, make sure they're happy and satisfied with it, and leave it alone. Whereas men keep kind of playing with it and moving it. And my mate said this and want to change it round.
So play. So investing wise, the key thing is if you've done the homework, you've got some money together, you want to invest. It's a long term game,
5 years plus.
Expert advice, and go for the long run, say the least, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
Your books are available in bookstores nationwide.
Yes.
You know that. And online. Your shows are all around the country now. You have 2 more. I'm sure you'll have even more on the way.
Yeah.
Well done on everything.
It's great.
You've got that great mission of you want to educate people, get Ireland talking about money, and it's a really important aspect of wellness, of health, of just general life that people need to upskill.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The balance is really good now because, like, I've been through a tough time a couple of years ago, banged my head. I think we talked about that before. Banged my head, a brain bleed, brain surgery, and made some decisions, and they're really coming. We're 7 years on now, nearly 8 years on. They really come to fruition. I brought Colin in to run Prosperous a couple of years ago, and Colin took us in the first 4 years from 4 staff to 40 staff. We are really, and you know what? We're a designated best place to work in Ireland. Not a great place to work, a best place to work. And which means the people who work with us are really happy too. And our clients give us 4.9 out of 5. Like so clients are happy, people are happy, I'm happy. Colin's probably unhappy, but that's his job. That's his job.
His job is to manage all the unhappy stuff. If people want to get in touch with you on Instagram and stuff, where they find you?
At Eoin McGee on Instagram is a great place to start, particularly for the Q&As and Saturdays, and then businessprosperous.ie.
Amazing. Owen, good to see you.
Thank you.
Play, buddy. Folks, I really hope you enjoyed today's episode of Real Health with me, Karl Henry. As ever, you know where we are at Karl Henry PT on Instagram, Real Health at independent.ie, and on the Irish Independent website. If you like what you heard, don't forget to rate and review, and we will see you next week for more Real Health. All good, folks.